table your letter in sort of waiting to schedule a community meeting where more people can hear from you.
I mean, I think my letter discusses the age of the building. I don't think that's going to change by having community meetings and listening to people. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm comfortable passing a motion on this letter and sending it. We can certainly pass other motions based on community meetings. Maybe that gets into the things Steve has pointed out with the light and stuff in that application. It could be a second letter. But I think for what I've drafted here about the age and that being a concern for me, I'm comfortable voting on this tonight.
But if we passed the letter as it's written as the amendment, then would you be open to, as chairman of the ANC, hosting a community meeting?
Yeah, we could host whatever you want if you want.
It's for the Historic Review Board to host a meeting, not us.
I mean, we can host a meeting to talk about the design aspects of the building or whatever, or the application if you want.
I don't think, Adam, that you're ready to vote on the letter.
Well, I've made the motion. I'm comfortable voting on the letter. So, and it's been seconded. So I think at this point, let's vote on this, and then if it doesn't pass, we can figure it out. So at this point, all in favor of sending this letter, which discusses my concerns with the age of the building and really not much else, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. And what's that? All opposed? 3. Abstaining?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just looking. Is there an actual recommendation of the ANC in this?
Just to oppose it for a time. However, I think obviously in the future they can apply after 12 months, and I think in the future as
we don't make the decision.
Things change, they can certainly go and
so
do it again.
I support sending the letter, whether
That's 4.
for or against.
All right, I'm not sure. Thank you. So that passes 4-3.
But you just said you weren't sure for or against.
He's 4.
No, you just said he's
I
4.
support
but he
sending the
said
letter,
he-
whether that's
For or against
That's
the
4.
the motion on the table.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Malachi?
Maliki?
So that passes.
You're brand new to the board. Have you had a chance to even look at the resolution, any of these things, to educate yourself?
No, but I support the idea that buildings that are designated historic should pass a much longer time.
But that's not the DC. That's not the case. That's not the DC.
Okay, so next item of the agenda is discussion and resolution regarding 37th Street Northwest traffic.
Excuse me. I would like the letter to have on the bottom of it that with my name that I oppose it.
I would like that also.
That's not
Not
in
just the
letter.
vote.
Yeah, I
Yes,
yes.
yes, we've done it in the past.
We've done it.
I don't know.
They didn't just pass.
Sure.
Write your own letter.
You can write your own letter opposing the action, I guess, if you wish.
No, we've done it in the past.
Okay, 37th Street traffic. So, basically, several months ago, we had a bunch of concerns in connection with the Hearst School renovations and talking to Sidwell. There's issues on 37th Street. Basically, there's pedestrian safety issues, congested roads during AM drop-off of students, congested roads during PM drop-off, and sometimes congested roads on weekends. So what we did is we approved forming a committee to discuss 37th Street. And basically what I did is I reached out to all the listservs and neighbors around Hearst. I reached out to Sidwell. I reached out to Hearst. I reached out to DGS, Department of General Services, who's renovating it, which basically was asking me to talk about this and figure out something. So pretty much every interested party except for DDOT, because they're basically like, figure it out and show us your idea, and we'll see what we think about it. So they didn't really participate in the process, so we moved forward there. So what we did is I accumulated comments of what are the issues you see on 37th Street. This is between Upton and Porter. It's probably a little broader than it actually is, but that's the area I looked at. I got comments from about 30 people. And then we had a brainstorming conference call with a bunch of people from the community that was publicly announced. And from that, we built a PowerPoint, which basically said, here are the issues, here's the focus area, and here's solutions that neighbors and people on the call and anyone else who emailed me or contacted me or stopped me in the street came up with. Based on that, I circulated this PDF to our Yahoo group, to all the neighbors, to Sidwell, to Hearst, to DGS, and I may have, I don't know if I put on other listservs, but it's been around a lot. And I received a number of comments, and basically what I asked is look at this PowerPoint and tell me which option you think might work the best. And those options were making 37th Street one way, making it variable one way, so one way north at one period, one way north at another period. One option was to make one side have no parking, and another option was to reconfigure parking, so you'd have parking on like part of it, then there'd be no parking, so basically like cars could weave in and out of parked cars on the sides. Based on this PDF and comments, while there were a handful of people that liked the one way, generally they were negative towards that, and really what it seemed to me, and based on talks with Hearst Principal and Sidwell and DGS, was that the making one side of the street, we haven't decided which side of the street, I don't know that actually matters, be no parking during AM and PM drop-off, so basically 7 to 9 and 3 to 5, because you need to be broader than the actual, period of time, because you need someone to come in and make sure the cars move and things like that. Basically, that was a solution that it seemed like most people agreed to. So based on that, I drafted a resolution which basically describes what I did and how I talked to everyone, and basically says we support one way, no parking on one side from 7 to 9 and 3 to 5. We also reiterate our request to get the crosswalk between Hearst and Sidwell painted, which they said they were going to do and they haven't done. And that would basically be a key to this, in that kids could walk across those two schools during the drop-off, and it would improve everyone's safety. And then also adding to this resolution, which you don't have, is just reiterating that the crossing guard needs to be there. I saw he was there today, but every once in a while he's not there, so we need to make sure the crossing guard's there as well. And the goal basically would be to forward this to DDOT, and then at that point, talk to them, implement this, and see if it improves everything during those hours. And I guess if it doesn't for some reason, we can come back to the drawing board and try something new. But basically, the proposal would be to talk to DDOT, try this, and see what happens. Because as far as anyone can figure out, and we spent a lot of time thinking about this seems like an option that might work and make everyone happy. So with that, that is my motion to approve this resolution. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Karen. So is there any comments to the resolution
Yes.
or questions on topic?
Yes.
Karen?
This is a friendly amendment. I
Yeah.
received an email tonight from Bill Coe, and I guess we all did.
Yeah, you all did.
Requesting no standing,
Yeah.
not no parking, but no
Right.
standing. And I think that's important, because otherwise you're still going to have cars and parents stopping and picking up and dropping off.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess
That's a standard.
That's the
I
standard
think
sign.
it's a
From the
standard
school.
anyway.
Yeah, but I think
no,
you need
I
to
think
put
they definitely do it at schools, because I talked to Jennifer Helfrin, and she actually recommended that with the Montessori school, that we definitely put the no standing and parking.
Okay.
That it's clear that that's what we want.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I was thinking about it more after Bill emailed me, and a few other people chimed in on that comment by email, and I guess we were trying to figure out if there's like a drop-off line, like
Right.
how that would interact with it, and I haven't really.
Well, then you have to come up with a sign that says, like at Merch School has that. We got those signs put in. It's specific that you can drop off at a 3 or 4 car, and it says only drop off at this
I see what
area.
you're saying.
So there are signs at Merch that you could go have pictures taken as
Okay.
to what you want. And people are not supposed to park there during the day.
I just
At the
think,
drop-off area, at each drop-off
So,
area.
so I guess let's add standing, but
No
then
parking.
add a, we asked the DDOT works with us to figure out drop off.
I want to,
Drop-off, right.
wait a minute, before you
And
do
it's
that.
specific.
Sally, wait a minute, before you do that. And I got to be honest, I went back and looked at the Sidwell application when they filed for their zoning
Yeah.
clearance. In there is a traffic report.
Yeah.
Sidwell is not following it. Wells did it. It was supposed to
I think
be,
they are.
no, they are not. There was supposed to be a drop-off, a line of cars, who can be on that street. And according to Wells and Associates, which is one of the better traffic consulting firms in this town, there should have been a reduction in cars, not the increase that we're seeing there. So, if you're going to do it, and the cars were supposed to be, there was a designated drop-off area on the Sidwell property. I think you need to go back also before, and look at what's in that application or what's in the board order on Sidwell, and look at their traffic management plan that they incorporated into the board order. Because actually, it's not being followed. So I think you go for the no parking, no standing, but the drop-off should not be for Sidwell. Because
Well,
they're
I
supposed
thought
to
the
be on their
plan-
property.
I thought the plan was that certain grades were on 37th, and
Yeah,
and then
but,
some go to the circle.
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, the
But I
middle
mean, but
school, I think the middle school
Yeah,
is
and then it's like the
37th.
Yeah.
kids are.
but if you look at the actual
The young
plan,
people.
it's
Wait a minute,
supposed to
can't
be
it
a
be drop
reduction.
off for both schools?
No,
Why can't we have a
Could be.
drop off for
That-
Hearst and a drop off for
it is now.
Sidwell?
I know,
So I
but
guess-
it's being done now, but you got to separate Sidwell from the other school because of the BZA order or the zoning commission order.
So I guess
That really requires Sidwell to do certain things,
even
including a
if the
monitor.
drop-off doesn't exist there for some reason, there's still going to be people
Dropping off.
So
Well, you might
I'm
as well
sure-
make it, because that's what happens. They
Yeah,
pick
yeah.
a spot, and that's where,
So that's what this is. To
But I think it
solve.
just says no standing, no parking, I think is enough for now. And then we need to go back and look at the actual Sidwell plan, and where the drop-offs are supposed
Sure,
to
we
be.
can look at that.
The monitor,
we can do the
because there was
drop-off,
supposed to
too.
be a reduction.
Okay, we can look at that again.
And
Okay,
Adam, what about the Secret Service? That's
they do what they want to do. So
Yeah, you can't
It
control
doesn't
them.
matter. It doesn't
You're not going to
matter.
control them no matter what.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, that's where they idle.
But they're going,
When the
they
calls are
don't
made.
care about us or DDOT.
Hey,
They're
look,
going
the
to do
police-
what they're going to do.
Okay.
Adam, why is the 37th Street between Porter and Quebec included? That doesn't seem to be part of the school, and that's just a residential block.
based on I struggled with whether to include that or not. Basically, that's even more narrow than 37th at Hearst and Sidwell. And basically, what happens is, because I think the one side's non-zoned. The west side, I think, is actually non-zoned, and then the east side is zoned. But basically, you get cars that park on both sides, and it's because it's so narrow, and it gets to that weird intersection where the Idaho Triangle is, that people can't turn in off Porter, and then you can't see when the bus is coming down Porter, and it's going to nail
Google
you in
Maps,
37, and it's just
there's
like a
signs
mess.
for
So I guess
zoned on each side.
is it zoned?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my thought is that would at least, well, I think there's two ways to approach it. We can ignore that here, and it's something I could work with 3C and try to figure out some solution there, just generally, because it's kind of messy.
I think
Is that
Or-
an RANC?
I don't, technically,
it's not.
it is the border, I think.
I don't think it,
Is it?
you know what my concern is?
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
taking
Okay,
away
so
parking
it's-
from homeowners?
It is
Why are
our
we-
That's
border.
3C, no, that's
I'll take it out, it's fine.
Why would we take away parking from the homeowners? And let them park in front of their homes, or their guests, or their nannies, or whatever?
Yeah, if we can just
Yeah, it's
limit
fine.
that
Change
to
Quebec.
Quebec to Upton, that'd be great, thank you.
So it's now between Upton Street and Quebec?
Yeah,
Not Porter?
correct. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So, any other questions?
Yeah, I'd like in the, whereas the ANC has previously voted to support making a no parking, I'd like it to read a friendly kind of thing. The ANC previously voted on blank date to support making a no standing parking zone.
Okay.
Whatever date,
I don't
whatever
remember
date
what it
you
is.
did that, because you refer,
Got it. Anything else?
And I think we need to hear too. Goes to Quebec.
Yeah, I changed it.
well, you got it.
Most places?
Yes.
Okay.
And just you're changing the no standing parking everywhere, right?
So, I mean, is standing gonna,
Yeah, standing's going to make a difference.
It does make a difference, Adam. You need to do that.
You really need to do that.
If not, what you're going to have is parents dropping off their kids in the
And you
in
do
the
that,
lane that you're now taking away parking from.
and then we need
They're
to
all gonna
drop
be
off
standing
on
there.
top of that.
Well, let's not go there, because
But
that's not,
if you're not going to
it's
do
not in the
that,
Sidwell plan.
okay.
That's a mandated plan, unless Sidwell
you
wants.
sure it's not in the
I'm
mandate?
positive.
So, I guess
I went back and
I'll
read
add
it.
I'll add standing for a moment because I don't know that we'll work it out with you. I mean, they may say no, but who knows? I don't know what they're going to say.
No, but it's a no
don't want
standing,
to
no
do that
parking, is
anyway.
what the sign says.
That's what the signs say.
It's on
I
Beasley
mean, that's what the
Terrace.
signs say.
No, they don't. There's two different signs. There's no parking
There's no
signs
parking,
and there's no
and
standing
there's no
signs.
standing and parking sign. And they recommend the no standing and
No
parking
parking.
at schools.
Always have.
TDOT's going to do what they do anyway.
No, but I don't think it hurts to put it in, Bob.
I'm not arguing with
And I didn't see anybody on the listserv object to it.
We got two questions from the audience.
Yeah, okay. So there are,
You got a couple?
well, are there any more commissioner edits or anything? Okay. Audience.
Well,
Let's have the guy in the back.
are you
start.
gonna attach the PDF?
What?
Thanks for a short
Attach
meeting
the
tonight.
PDF?
Anytime.
A couple quick thoughts. Again, David from Hearst.
I got that. I said attach it.
I'm there every morning and every afternoon and every weekend. I appreciate, Adam, all your work on this. I admittedly haven't looked at the resolution, so that's unfortunate. But thanks.
There's been some changes.
I like the idea that there be a crosswalk established between the front doors, essentially, of Hearst and Sidwell, so that's not at a natural intersection. That's in the middle of the block. The architect, Ronnie McGee, is integrating that into the plans. I think they're trying to get that established. As part of that, or near that center of the block crosswalk, there will be hopefully a curb cut that establishes a drop-off in front of Hearst. So it cuts into the out of the
They're
street.
called laybys.
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 I'm not going to get that term.
L-A-Y-B-Y.
Lay-by.
Lay-by. Okay. Yeah, I like that. Okay. I don't know if it's in your resolution, but in addition to the center of the street crosswalk, the crosswalks at Tilden and 37th, there's currently one that runs north-south, but there need to be two that run east-west to kind of connect over to the retirement home there. If that isn't in the resolution, it'd be great if it could be included.
You know, the post office is owned by the land on the post office is owned by the home.
Is that right?
Washington Home.
Yeah, they
And it's got a
released-
beautiful slope. Maybe we should make a historic
released
landmark
it.
out of the terminal. We'll do some land swaps.
It is beautiful architecture.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So the question, and Ms. Perry, I think, hinted around it with the addition of the no standing and Ms.
Gresham.
Gresham as well. the no standing, it admittedly does raise some concerns to me, and it gets to the question of, you've got Sidwell basically going one direction with their drop-off and pickup going south. And they park, or they are sort of in a waiting area between Tilden and Upton. Upton. So that, if you put the no parking, no standing there, that ruins Sidwell's process. Conversely, if you put it on the other side of the street and put it between Hearst and Quebec, you've now destroyed the northbound traffic where Hearst drops off. And I know we're not taking a position tonight on which side of the street, but that's a pretty fundamental question as to what you're going to do. The crossing guard was there. If we continue to have a crossing guard, that mitigates a lot of the traffic and safety concerns. But you fundamentally now have Ms. Shelby, the principal at Sidwell, out in front of her school doing morning drop-offs. They kind of wait for 10 minutes back toward Upton, and they slowly make their way up. So you're technically standing there for 10 minutes as you're waiting to pick up or drop off. And now, conversely, Hearst has staff in front of its school and even across the street at Sidwell for morning drop-off, and there's some sort of queuing up there that may or may not involve significant standing. I don't have an answer, Adam. I really don't know what to do on it, but my concern about making it no standing is you're really leaving, there's so many people at so much time. You've got 300 kids at Hearst and I don't know how many at Sidwell. There's no way in a 10-minute drop-off period you're gonna do this with a no standing. I get the safety, I get the idea that you have curb cuts and you have lay-bys and you have significant drop-offs, but that's not reality there. It's not going to work there. I'm sure tickets won't be issued, but you're encouraging, non-abiding laws. People aren't going to comply with that. I'm not sure what the answer is, but
to a certain degree, you're right, but actually Merch has instituted where they had parents come in, and yes, some people were very rude to them, would come in and say, please don't park here, don't stand here, this is a drop-off area, or this is a no standing area. They actually had Officer Frankenjack come and come and give tickets.
Well, I could see. I mean, it's all about.
That was during my time. I don't know what's going on now.
It's all about where.
It's the different situation without the competing school.
There are two competing schools, and I think
Well, it is, but
potentially, if it is about where you locate these signs, and to take a hit for Hearst, I don't necessarily mind it being on the Hearst side, but you need it a certain distance away from the driveway that enters Hearst, that it be 50 yards down the street, and it's no parking, no standing. You've got recreational uses throughout the day. I'm not sure how you're going to really entertain that on the park side, if you will. And then conversely, from Tilden down to Upton, make that no parking, no standing. There are no houses there's one house at the corner of Upton and 37th that sort of faces 37th, but I doubt you're taking away their street parking at that point. Anyway.
Yeah, no,
I don't know. I'm not trying to be difficult.
No. I'm thinking about the standing more. The real issue that causes the mess there is people are parked. We've had trucks parked there, it's not so much the parents letting the kid run out and just goes and moves 5 seconds later. It's more, and I agree that Sidwell drop-off thing they do where they line up. Works. It doesn't work when someone's parked.
Right. Inevitably, somebody's parked in their queue, and then it
bows out, and that's where the issue is. So I think, in a way, I'm inclined to. I'm thinking about it more. I'm inclined to leave out the standing for now, and then I'll talk to DDOT. Maybe they recommend it or something, or who knows some solution. I'll talk to them. We'll figure it out. But for now, I'm going to take standing back out just to confuse everyone here.
Sorry. There's an entrance to
You're going to
that's right.
recommend putting standing back in.
Standing's going.
Standing.
Yeah, no,
How you doing?
Traffic?
good. David Wasco. I live on 37th, just at the corner of Van Ness. And so the issue I wanted to flag for you is about the cut-throughs that come up 37th, the folks who are using 37th as a commuter right-of-way. You live right off of 37th, right?
Yeah.
So, and so it's very trafficy now on 37th already. And so the question I would flag, or the concern, is that this could exacerbate that a bit. It could lead to an increased traffic flow along 37th. And so I think, the resolution could, in fact, say that there has to be a look as well at how this is going to affect the upstream traffic flow
The
on
no
37.
parking zone is only from 7 to 9 and 3 to 5.
I understand, but it's 7 to 9 when there's quite a stream of traffic along 37th. It's quite significant. It's surprisingly significant, in fact.
Okay, so I guess, let me think how to draft that.
You can't stop cut-through traffic.
No, I don't want to. That's not. It's more that.
Yeah, but
Traffic calming.
that'll make
which
it
we
worse
haven't
for
I think
them.
just a
I guess
look
we'll
at how this
ask
affects the
DDOT
upstream.
to work with us to reevaluate how this is working 6 months out or something.
Yeah,
like
no,
that.
that's fine.
And then if there are issues, we'll say, whoa, hold on.
Can there be a traffic study or a
There was one that
We've asked and they won't do it.
they won't.
DDOT, or can we hire somebody to do it?
It won't make any difference. Wells and Associates did a very big one for Sidwell.
Adam,
Yeah.
That's in the
just real
record
quick, I know
already.
you had a crossing
Look
guard
at it. It does that whole
Yeah.
area.
built into your resolution. I don't
But-
know if you can
but
add
why
another
can't some
crossing
of that be
guard at,
instituted then?
at his corner
That's what I raised.
at Van
They're
Ness
not
and
following.
37th. That's a huge mess there as well
Nobody's
as
looked
down
at
as closer to the school, but that's a
I think I'll have
significant.
to handle that.
Well,
Huh?
I
Not
raised
for.
it tonight.
Not
Weren't
with,
you doing a study on the whole
yeah.
Van Ness? I don't know
We
if
I
that.
guess we could.
I don't know.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
All right, we'll add just to look at second crossing.
That could just slow down the traffic.
Nobody's looked
Okay,
at
you
it.
got it.
It's not my job to look.
May as well ask.
I'm not on that.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay.
Call for the question.
We'll vote on this. All in favor of that as revised?
Okay, so it's Quebec Street and no standing only, right?
No.
I mean, no
No.
parking
No parking only.
and Quebec.
We're going to ask
Change
DDOT
where I put the
to
date.
And
evaluate
reevaluate the 6
how it
months.
works after 6 months,
Yeah.
and we'll throw in a second crossing guard at 37.
Okay.
Add a crosswalk by the Washington Home.
Yes.
Two.
Exactly.
Yes, one north and
Perfect.
south.
Okay.
And you're putting the date when you did the no parking zone.
I'm being
If you
secretary.
can
Yeah,
find
yeah,
it.
yeah. Exactly. Okay. So all in favor?
Did you sign
Aye.
this?
Aye.
Yeah.
All in favor? Vote.
Aye.
Aye.
7-0-0. Thank you. All right. Next. Resolution about boundary changes.
Okay, so I've got about 20 minutes of remarks to, no.
Oh, good.
Okay, so I've actually split this into two resolutions. One on, there's the two parts of the resolution. So I split it into two, so we can raise one, have a motion to consider one and then vote. And
Which one are you doing first?
I'm going to do the general principles first. So the idea behind this is that this been the ongoing process that started in fall of 2013. You should have two different ones.
I have two the same, but I printed them out, so
Okay.
I guess they, okay.
So, yeah, you've got it. So are we all set? Sorry. So the idea is these are two separate resolutions because it was effectively two parts. And if we're successful and I've gotten good responses on the general principles part, may look to do something along the same lines we did with the merch resolution on renovations and see if any other ANCs will sign on to it. I think there'll be less interest in the specific boundaries issue. So this is obviously a very emotional and as it's become a very political process. The situation to date is that they've had their the first set of policy examples were released in the first part of the month. And in some ways, they're a little bit of a distraction. There's policy example A, B, and C. And people have focused on A, B, and C. But you really shouldn't actually focus on A, B, or C, because that's not actually the issue. It's what's contained in A, B, or C that is what matters. So this is, in some ways, it's like a wedge game. You take this element, this element, this element, and you get a solution to all the problems across the city. So it's not, as it stands right now, as we understand the process as it's developed, it's not that they're considering A, B, or C. So read A, B, or C, but don't focus on A, B, and or C. Read A, B, and C, but don't focus on A, B, or C. Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that's why what we're looking to do here is not engage in a real discussion of some of the specifics, because frankly, I don't think it would have been fair, and I'm not really prepared to say, middle school should have a 15% set aside for children from underperforming schools under certain standards from, to be admitted out of boundary. There may be a time to do that. The timing right now is that there's going to be this additional set of working group meetings on Thursday. It's frankly not entirely clear what's going to happen on Thursday. It sounds like it's going to be very similar to the previous meeting, which was a lot of discussion and input from the community, but not anything, but it'll be different questions this time. So what we're looking to do in this general principles resolution was to identify the things that we're hearing from the community and we believe in as being key issues for establishing the student assignment review, and then we'll get an opportunity to engage in the specifics when we think a recommendation is going to come out at the end of May, sometime in the end of May. And then there'll be a comment period, and then there'll be another recommendation that the Deputy Mayor for Education gives to the Mayor, and then the Mayor may or may not do something, and then the new Mayor may or may not scrap it all. So the timing is, there are very serious concerns about the timing in that sense because of the political calendar. But on top of that, there's been the argument that this is a way to deal with changing enrollment patterns based on a lot of things that have happened in the city. And the perception, and in some quarters I think is fair because of the way enrollment changes have occurred, is that this is a way to deal with overcrowding in some parts of the city and underperforming schools in other parts of the city. And some of the things the Deputy Mayor says actually lends itself to that conclusion. I'm not 100% certain that I agree with it, but it's not an unreasonable thought. So the concern about the timing is that there are still so many problems in some schools, that the timing to make these sort of shifts is not particularly auspicious. So we obviously have two schools in our area, Murch and Hearst, and then obviously Deal and Wilson also covers our area. So I have a motion to introduce this resolution on advocacy for general principles related to the DCPS student assignment review process. It sort of describes what's happened to date. It emphasizes the predictability in school enrollment and maintaining feeder patterns for in-boundary and out-of-boundary students in schools in the boundaries for those feeder patterns for the secondary schools. Makes the point that it's important for neighborhood cohesiveness and parent commitment to schools. Talks about lotteries. One of the things that's, as far as a general principle, I don't think this is getting into specifics, is that one of there's a sense of distinct lack of engagement on the charter schools in the policy concepts, despite the fact that the charter schools are used as an example as to why we're in the situation where we are across the city. You recognizes comments by Councilmember Bowser and Catania on the maintaining by right school system. So therefore be it resolved focuses on having clear and extensive grandfathering regardless of what happens. And then the bullets are geographic by right schools at elementary, middle, and high school, predictability and stability related to feeder patterns, no district-wide lotteries except for pre-K3 and pre-K4, which is something that exists now and is an issue that gets into, there's some other related factors on space that impacts. The thorough review of potential changes related to charter schools, and that there be coordinated planning between charter and DCPS to ensure that both can thrive and play their appropriate role in the district's educational landscape. Consideration for, and this is one change I need to make, is middle and high school options. I want to cut the middle. That's really high school options located in Ward 3. And if anybody has the issue with this is that the deputy mayor has sought to take the this in some ways is very specific. Sought to take the Duke Ellington Western High School issue off the table. But at the same time, there's some fanciful ideas about new middle schools in other parts of the city that are supposed to be built in like 6 months.
So the average geographic by right schools at the elementary and high school level?
No, in this last bullet, consideration for new middle and high school options. This is really high school options.
So you're taking middle out.
Middle out. And that we're, going to look at the further recommendations when they come down. And then I think you lost the last paragraph, that the last clause in the printout that was done. It's the same as on the other one, that myself, Maliki, and Adam are authorized to speak, although I don't think we necessarily are limiting others' right to speak on schools. So that's my motion to introduce this resolution.
I'll second it. Is there discussion on this motion? Yeah.
I have a basic problem, and I've always had it, so it's got nothing to do with the boundary changes, and it's something I've yet to understand. Being an Army brat and having moved around, I always went to the local school in my neighborhood, or you went to a private school or whatever. And I see people move into my apartment building, and they're in my building for a year, 9 months, whatever. They put their child in a Ward 3 school. Then they buy a home in Ward 7, Ward 8, Ward 5, and all of their unborn children still get to come to these schools over here. And I guess I have a basic problem with grandfathering in kids that aren't even born yet coming over here by car and whatever. I don't understand that. Why those unborn I can understand the child that's already in school in Ward 3 that's been here for a year, continuing until he's out of elementary, middle, whatever. But why the unborn children that are now living in Ward 5 get grandfathered into schools over here? I don't understand that.
Because you don't bring up families.
Yeah. It becomes logistically very difficult if you have to take one child to a Ward 3 school and one to a Ward 5 school.
This is actually not
school. You can walk to it in a lot of cases,
the
or
problem,
take the bus or whatever.
This is not the same. Just to be clear, that's not the same kind of that's actually not grandfathering in the sense that we're talking about grandfathering here.
I think my grandfather can go to any school he wants.
Yeah, that's
different. I'm sorry.
What you're talking about is preference, admissions preference for siblings.
Yeah.
Sibling preference, and that is actually potentially on the table for policy changes. You could theoretically do away with all sibling preference. There are things that they could theoretically do, but this question of then moving across town, if I'm not mistaken, the principals actually have the right and they have the ability, if a child moves out of the boundary, to no longer they can actually be dropped from the rolls.
I'm not sure out of the boundary.
If you move out of,
if
you're out of the city, absolutely, but out of the boundary, I believe the principal actually has the ability.
For the current student or for the unborn?
For the current student. They just don't do it. But this is something this is actually a separate. Gets into the specifics of changes to policies. It's a separate matter, and it's really not under consideration. This is that if you are
to include coverage of children not yet mature.
Okay, so I'll use myself as an example. I purchased a house in the Merch catchment area. Sorry, it's West Coast for you. In the Merch boundaries, with the understanding that my child would go to Merch, Deal, Wilson. If they change the policies and do away with feeder patterns, What I'm calling for, and what people are looking for, is that I will still have the right to go to Deal and Wilson, send my children to Deal and Wilson. The potential is what they're looking at. If they go to a city district-wide lottery for high schools, for always,
I don't want that
that's
at all.
then, well, but if they did that, I would still look for myself, and I'm using myself as an example, anybody who's purchased a house in this area would still have that by right to Deal and Wilson, even if they go to citywide, district-wide lottery.
But
That's
And
the issue that people
the
are looking for.
unmatriculated child is the situation I'm in.
And the
I've got 2
unmatriculated
daughters at Merge and a son who's not in school yet. And so the idea is, if we do the grandfathering for the kids who are already in, we extend that so that the family can all go through the system
And
together,
it-
and we won't be sending 2 kids to Merge and then having to drive 1 kid somewhere else.
And then the discussion, and again, that's where we're looking for definition that hasn't been provided, is to go even further, that people who are in those boundaries now would have that grandfathering in place, on the assumption they may not have had children, but they purchased for that reason.
Does this actually say that, though?
Does it say that?
Yeah. you say it, and-
I mean, does this
Yes.
actually say, okay.
I think it says
Now, my other
that.
question, no district-wide lotteries other than on a limited basis for pre-K 3 and pre-K 4. Why would you do a lottery for those ages?
Because not every school actually has pre-K 3 and pre-K 4 programs.
But they all should.
Well, that's a separate
Well, that's a
discussion.
separate-
And that is
I know,
actually a
pre-K
possible
four.
that is one of the policy considerations. But then there are other considerations there, like that increases the size of the school, the footprint
Like
of the
merge.
requirement, and so forth.
I'm
would
not
be
saying no.
totally-
I guess I believe in keeping kids in the neighborhood.
Period. Well,
Yeah.
a lot of people do.
That also
Well,
involves
and that's-
making better schools.
Yeah, that
One
also
of the
assumes that
principles
the
we've
neighborhood
discussed
schools.
is that we should be focusing just as much, and the city should be focusing just as much on improving the schools that are underperforming in other parts of the
I
city.
agree. I totally
So that
agree.
there's less pressure on the schools in Ward 3 as well.
And it would
And
cut
in
down
terms
on
of-
some of the traffic and the.
In terms of the grandfathering question as well, there is also an issue for families who have moved into the district who don't have children yet, who have very small children and have moved here specifically for the schools, and to change the terms of the contract on them now, after they have just moved into the district, is something that is a serious concern for some families. To say,
No,
well,
I guess what I'm talking about are people who move into apartment buildings and then have children that are not even born yet, and they're living in other areas of the city.
mhm.
I'm not talking, and, if the
I've
child
almost
that
got to have
starts.
kids.
Right.
So-
No, and there is
so-
that discretion. There is that discretion. And at Merch, for example, where you already have 91% of the student body is inbound, it's up to the principal to say, we don't have room for you out of bounders anymore.
So
But
that's
it-
the number. The number is 9% is out of bounds?
No, that's actually not the number. Sorry.
What's
the
the
number,
number?
91% is the utilization rate. 91% of the children in Merch's boundaries go to Merch, who are of elementary school
So
age.
what's
It's about 85%.
Oh, okay.
Wait a minute, 85% are
Inbound.
inbound,
Yeah.
and you got 15%?
It's about 15%, but the number is dropping because there's very little,
There's more
there's
people
so
moving
many
into
people
Ward
in
3.
boundaries that
So-
it's not 15% at each grade. It's mostly right now at like the 4th and 5th grade is where the bulk of the out of boundary are. There's some at Orv who got in different ways, but there's very limited room right now. For example.
But if you took 15% of out of boundary from, we struggled with this same thing years ago. You took that 15% out,
You're still overcrowded.
yeah, but you're less
You're less
overcrowded.
Yeah,
So
but
yes,
there's
you're
value,
overcrowded
but-
because
but-
of the neighborhood
But there's
demographics, but, so.
I'm not opposed to out of bounds.
Yeah,
students
yeah,
going
this is
to
a
schools
separate-
here. I'm talking about unborn children that don't even live in this ward anymore.
That-
Well, I'm opposed to it when the schools are
Okay,
overcrowded.
so that's not actually,
Unborn children in
that's
this
not
resolution.
actually, I'm sorry?
I
that in
thought
this
it was,
resolution?
I thought it
There
was
are
what it said,
unborn,
grandfathering.
there are children not yet matriculating.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what she's,
That's-
Under consider,
Yeah.
but that's not, we're not talking about the same thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Then good. So let's save that discussion.
Yeah, 'cause that
for
could
another-
be-
what
Explain the
about out of
difference.
boundary?
So
That's
are
not,
there more comments on
No.
this
it is,
in the
can
interest
the
of time?
out of boundary is not being addressed here?
I do. I think the out of boundary, how you like this question of set asides for out of boundary is a specific policy issue. It has implications for how you set the boundaries, but that is that's not a sort of general principle that I think is easily stated or really desirable to state in this general approach.
In the general, but is it going to be in something else at a certain point?
At some point, I think we will want to look at that, but I don't feel like I would be in a position, like I said before, to make an argument about what the set-aside rate should be at each level and so forth. And that's where the out-of-boundary comes in, because there's other schools that have higher out-of-boundary rates for a number of reasons, and Hearst is an example, has a higher out-of-boundary rate
I know.
for a number of reasons, and some other schools have higher out-of-boundary rates, in part because of specific issues related to that school, and that's not, in this sense, a principle that I think we
But that has
necessarily need
nothing,
to engage.
are you saying that has, I understand that you say you don't feel that you can address it, but.
Or need
is
to
it-
address it.
But it needs to be addressed.
I don't think it needs to be addressed.
Well,
in
it doesn't
this
need to be
document.
addressed yet, simply because what the city has put out there for sort of comment and discussion is this idea of, do people like lotteries? Are people okay with the idea of choice sets?
Okay, as long as you
Those-
tell me you're going to address it at a certain point, because in Merch's case, you're going to have to address that.
You're going to have to address it.
You
that's
have
right.
to address it.
But they
You
haven't. They
don't
haven't
have
come.
to address
Yeah,
it.
you do.
I don't know what you don't.
Well, there will have to be a decision at some point
Because-
on what the
yeah,
set aside will be,
because
but
of
that's
the-
not on the table yet. I mean, that's not something that's being discussed yet.
Oh, fair enough.
Okay, I understand. If
So
you're
right now
saying it's
we're-
not going to be
reacting-
discussed until a later
Right.
date, I just,
We're
I don't know
reacting
clear
to the,
that it's
thing,
going
to
to
the
be
first set of
discussed.
things that they put on the table, which was citywide lotteries, choice sets, those sorts of things.
Right.
And so what we're
I don't
saying
know why
here
we can't
is
just say we don't like all three.
we don't like the principles that are embodied by
In all
those
three.
three.
I
But
think-
those three didn't specifically say there should be 15% set aside
I'm not
or
talking
10%.
about that. I'm
No,
just
they
saying,
don't say that.
I would just
Right.
love to see this resolution say we don't like all three.
Yeah, it does say that.
Not in plain.
Not in plain English.
English.
I guess I'm one who,
I mean, this is a long
I guess
resolution.
when I
know
read
No
that.
district-wide lotteries.
no, I guess when I
Yeah,
read
but that
something
doesn't-
and I send something,
Predictability,
I-
Peter pattern.
to me, right up in the front, and maybe it's just the way I learned how to write, you say what you want. And this, to me, is a long resolution that most people aren't even going to read. And it's somewhere, I think,
Most of our resolutions are.
no, but but I'm right.
But this is being sent to like the school.
But
people,
somewhere,
school
Who
people
is it
that
I don't,
being sent to?
I guess to me, it ought to somewhere
People
say,
who it calls on to
we
do
don't
things, the
like
deputy mayor.
any
Well, I
of the
know, but I don't
options
know who those
presented.
are.
In
The
plain
deputy mayor
English.
is Abigail Smith.
Okay,
The
just to
deputy mayor
her
for education.
and to other,
Why
I
can't
assume other
somewhere in
people.
this, in one of these resolution, whereas clauses say we don't like any of the three proposals, period?
Because that's the sort of thing that goes in the be it, therefore be it resolved paragraphs. Those are the ones that are operative. All this other nonsense is preamble. That's
Yeah, but
every
nowhere-
resolution in the entirety of
nowhere
the
does
time
it say we
that
don't
you've
like-
been on the ANC that the whereas is not operative, the therefore
But
be
this
it resolved
doesn't,
is
yeah, but I
operative.
guess what I'm saying is, normally then, in a whereas clause, you would say whereas,
You support
policy,
or oppose.
well, whereas
or-
policy example A, B, and C has been put on the table, or whatever. And it doesn't say that in
It
here.
absolutely says that.
Where
Read
in
the
the
resolution.
whereas clause does it say?
It says, the advisory committee released 3 policy examples that included potential policy changes to the factors addressing student assignment,
And
such
that's
as.
and that's where I would say that we don't agree with those, with any of the
She's
three.
saying she wants that over here.
But that's not the way resolutions are done.
No, I'm not, Sally. I'm not saying I want to move it.
Well,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to get
I guess-
frustrated, but this is
I guess I
absurd.
just like
this is
clear
what we
language.
got now. So at this point,
I'd rather hear
David,
from
you-
the, yeah.
quick statement.
Real quick.
Thanks.
Because I'm
Manoli,
hungry.
I'm sorry.
Malachi.
Malachi, thank you for hosting a meeting last week on this as well, where the whole room was in fact filled. And I'm sure some parents tried to stay tonight and couldn't hang in there. Because there was an article on the front page of the Northwest Current last week, top of the fold, that addressed this issue, I think it incumbent upon me to respond. And I'd like to just read a written statement, if you don't mind. And it does get to the out-of-boundary issue, which I think is a very critical. One of your schools in the ANC values out-of-boundary families, probably different from what I've heard so far on the panel. So I'd like to read that statement, if I may. My name is David Dickinson. I live within this ANC. My 2 daughters attend Hearst Elementary. Within the ANC, I previously served as PTA president at Hearst and currently serve as the LSAC co-chair at Hearst. I want to address 3 quick separate topics with DC's review of the boundaries, student assignment, and feeder patterns. Given the special perspective of Hearst families who come from all across the city, I would like to provide some policy goals that many parents from Hearst share. Second, I would like to address some misunderstandings that occurred at an ANC gathering here last week that led to or further fed some unfortunate impressions on various listservs from certain merged parents, and is reported in the recent Northwest Current. Perhaps most importantly, and what might tie all my comments together, is the idea of DC public school education and a matter of education community compact, and that's different from a social contract or buying a house. I'm motivated in part by an experience shared with an African-American kindergarten boy on Hearst Playground last year. One morning he tapped me, and I'm sorry this is long, but I've waited 2.5 hours. One morning he tapped me on the shoulder and noted that he had picked up my fallen bike and placed it safely to the side of the kids. I shook his hand and thanked him. He then gave me a hug and we had a nice conversation. For weeks he would greet me in the playground each morning. I would look forward to his smile and hugs. As PTA president, I would often wake early and walk the neighborhood, marveling at how Hearst got the best effort from parents located near the school, as well as tremendous contributions from parents across the city. One morning at 6:45 a.m., I watched a dad exit a city bus on a wheelchair with a child in his lap. That child was my buddy from the playground. I mentioned to his dad how wonderful his son was, and he had tears in his eyes while stating how lucky he was to have his son at Hearst. I noted earlier the concept of an educational community compact. The community is as much this ANC as it is Ward 3, as it is the entire city. DC public schools and families deserve to be respected and served equally, and all involved in the educational effort should be required to assist and provide comments based on this sense of community at all levels. It is incredible that a very small number of parents at Merch would choose to question and possibly disparage the curriculum and educational experience at Hearst in order to justify their goal of remaining at an extremely overcrowded school. Let me be clear. The objective and perspective shared by the parents of Hearst is that all families at the school are part of a vital community for all of our children, and we are very thankful for our diversity and are committed to addressing the needs of each child. Should additional families from the current Hearst boundary or additional families within the prospective new boundary that includes families from Merch and Janney decide to join Hearst, then those families would become part of the same vital community and would be very welcome. Despite comments to the contrary, families from any of the other schools in this ward are very, very welcome at Hearst, as they are from all across the city. We have an open house this Friday at 9 a.m., and I encourage any family to attend and visit the classrooms. Many Hearst parents share 4 policy goals, and this gets into your resolution. 1, predictable access to quality schools. Parents need to have certainty in order to invest their time, effort, and money to improve their schools. This is essentially captured in your resolution, so I'll skip through that. But maintaining clear feeder patterns with single elementary, middle, and high school provide that certainty. 2, preserve feeder rights for out-of-boundary students. The benefits of predictability are equally important for both inbounds and out-of-bounds families. Out-of-bound families contribute an incredible amount to the life and success of Hearst, and these types of families are a significant presence at schools across the city. Therefore, disrupting feeder patterns for such out-of-bound families disrupts many schools across the city if continuity is not ensured. I'm not sure if you're capturing that in the resolution. I think you are. But probably most importantly, what I haven't heard tonight is that broad access to the broad access that is ensured by the out-of-bounds lottery process. We are keenly aware at Hearst that many families in DC do not have access to high-quality in-boundary schools. We all need to contribute to better schools across DC. But that's going to take time. We can all sit here and say we need better schools across the city, but that's going to take time. Families cannot wait and must be given an opportunity to access quality out-of-boundary schools, and schools should be making reasonable accommodations for such access. It's a tough issue. The wording in the resolution that just says no out-of-boundary lottery process except for pre-K 3 and 4 is something that the Hearst parents that I've spoken to strongly disagree with. Lastly, and we've talked about this before, the strengthening of schools across the city, expanding access to pre-K 3 and pre-K 4, and target those programs for schools with the greatest need, and thereby also improving the overall quality of such schools. Lastly, if radical changes are made in the city's school assignment and feeder patterns, extraordinary grandfathering would be imperative. I and the community at Hearst look forward to working with the members of this ANC to ensure that our local and broad community can further the universal values of public schools in D.C. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you for sticking out, and it was very well put, and I appreciate your comments. I think just in terms of looking at the language, this bullet about no district-wide lotteries was actually, I could see how it was interpreted. That was not the intent. The intent was a sort of related to the first bullet, like not eliminating by right.
Right.
Because I think the concern is that it's really at the high school level, eliminating the by right access to the high schools. That was the intent, but I can understand, especially adding the pre-K language muddles it. That was the intent.
Certainly
it's
the
not-
Hearst families, as I said, along with Merch, I'm sure Janney agree with that by right.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to look at that language, and I think it's an important point. You talk about what the out-of-boundary percentage is at Merch, and it is important to note that the Merch community does value the out-of-boundary enrollment, as do, I believe,
They've
most
said that.
other schools. Yeah, and it is valued. So I still.
But Merch and Hearst have always been very different as far as that.
Yeah, but still, it's a
So I
question of
don't-
how
I don't
whether or
think
not
you
it's
equate
worked
the
in.
two.
I'm not equating to. It's a question of how you
I just
Okay.
stated the values of Hearst.
Yeah.
how the maintaining rights for out of boundaries as a policy principle, or maintaining slots for
Right.
out
I
of
think what
boundary.
you're trying to get at here is that there would be no mandated district-wide lotteries. You'd still have the opportunity to enter a lottery if you wanted to, but what's been put on the table is every student in the whole system would be forced into a lottery for high school and even middle school, and that's what we're opposed to. Not opposed to the idea that there would be a lottery for some out-of-boundary students in the schools.
Okay. All right. I think what I can do is say no mandated district-wide
Mandate's a
lotteries.
key word.
That's what added it. No mandated district-wide lotteries. No mandated district-wide lotteries. I had it a second ago. While maintaining options for out-of-boundary lotteries
At some level.
at to be TBD levels, relevant to the specifics of the school, specific circumstances of the school, or something like that.
Okay. I think at this point, you're okay. We can take a vote.
I'm okay.
All right, so let's just vote on this. At this point, all in favor of this resolution as modified by Manoli, say aye.
Right?
Passes 7-0-0.
Okay, so the second one is in some ways more challenging. It gets to what David Dickinson was just talking about. The second recommendation that was proposed was to move the boundary of Merch and Hearst from Yuma to Chesapeake. And from an SMD perspective, this largely hits Milwaukee. The impact is on Malachi's SMD and mine as well, but much more in Malachi's. And there has been vocal opposition from the merch community, and this gets to what David was saying before about that there has been disparaging language used. And I thought when we had the meeting here, he was brave to actually speak at that as well, because it was largely merch families who have been most active on this, and there has been a sort of vocal campaign in a number of ways, both in listservs and then also going direct to council members and people who are involved in the advisory committee. The two issues that sort of jump out, okay, we'll put it also, earlier draft of this, you saw that there was paragraphs on the renovations at Hearst and at Merch. I ended up removing those paragraphs. One of the arguments that's been made is that the timing is not right for a consideration of Merch, because the renovations, school enrollment's going to be at 680 next year, but the renovations are going to push capacity like up 800-900. That's, in my mind, from sitting on the sit, that's not going to happen. Like that is a size that is very, very unlikely. Whether or not it goes to 700, that's an open question. But still, going to like 850 or I've heard people talk about 1,000, which then makes all of this moot, because the reason for this is because of perception of availability at Hearst because of out of boundary and overcrowding at Merch. They were just sort of looking, okay, how can we fix this? This was a way to do it. I think I removed those because I think there's not enough information to actually make an argument either way about what the impacts will be. I've also been reluctant. There's been an environmental argument that's made, which, based on the discussion about 37th Street, I don't think really is valid in any sense. Or I think it can be argued both ways. So there are some open questions about Hearst being able to absorb the numbers that or Merch would potentially shift. The impact on out-of-boundary availability for people across the city that David was just talking about. There is some basics on geographic distance. So for example, 4600 Connecticut Avenue, that's between Brandywine and Chesapeake. I'm sorry?
No, we know the building.
Would now go to Hearst.
Yeah.
Is effectively 2.5 blocks away. And then there's the walkability. I'll be upfront. I've had people laugh when I've talked about the walkability issues and having to cross Reno Road. People have to cross Connecticut, cross Nebraska, have to cross Reno, as it is to get to Merch. That doesn't necessarily make it right that more kids should have to do that, so it's a reasonable point. But the larger argument is that there's really been no data-driven justification. There are other ways to deal with the Merch boundaries. I'll be upfront. I'm a little bit agnostic on my own resolution.
I like this one better.
But
I
there's
like it even more after my amendments.
I guess I'll just. And also, the other thing I'll say, I do think we need to be measured on this, because I think also this proposal is on its last legs. I don't think it's actually going to survive the next round of changes, but that's just my reading on the tea leaves.
Think this one, or just the
I don't think the proposed move is going to survive.
Of the boundaries.
But that's.
But I think
I
we
don't
need
have
to go on record anyway.
So, okay.
So I'm done.
So are you moving this resolution?
Yeah. So I have a motion to introduce this resolution.
All right, I'll second it.
So can I have a question?
I have a couple of comments. I have a couple
So,
of
all
things.
right, it's been seconded, so
I have
I'll go first.
if I could go first,
Okay.
because I have quite a few what I consider friendly amendments
Mine
to the
are too, so-
resolution. And it is the case that most of the impact of this change is in my SMD. So I've heard a lot from the people who live in that area. I think that this is a very good resolution. I like the way that it lays out sort of the basic principles. My main suggested change to this is to recognize explicitly the opinions of the people in the affected area. That's the one thing that I think is missing from this, that it doesn't say the people who live in the area affected are unambiguously opposed to this change. Because that's what I have heard, and I think it's worth noting that in the resolution. We as the, I hope we as the ANC will support the resolution and oppose this change, but I think it's worth going on the record saying that the people who are most directly affected by it are strongly and unambiguously opposed to it. Now, that's not to say that their view is right necessarily, David. Some of them are opposed for the wrong reasons. I'm not commenting on the validity of that. What I'm saying is exactly, and what I'm saying is that the people that I represent in this area, to the man and to the woman, have said, we hate this. We do not want this to go forward, and I want that reflected in the resolution. So I have a bunch of other friendly amendments in here, which I can pass around to everyone, but that's the one that's most important to me, and so I'll read it to you. I would propose adding in here another whereas clause that says, whereas families living in the affected area have expressed strong and unambiguous opposition to the proposed boundary changes, stemming from the fact that they live in an area that is traditionally considered merged to be a focal point for the community, and reassigning them to a geographically distant Hearst, as well as requiring them to cross Reno, this is using some of the language that's already there, to cross Reno Road to walk to school, would violate the core factors of walkability and neighborhood cohesiveness that they value and the Deputy Mayor of Education has emphasized.
I like it.
Thank
But
you.
that's me.
And so then I would further edit the therefore be it resolved paragraph to say, therefore be it resolved that ANC 3F strongly opposes the proposed change to the Merge-Hearst boundary on the basis that 1, it is strongly and unambiguously opposed by the constituents most directly affected by the proposed change. 2, it violates the core factors of walkability and neighborhood cohesiveness identified by the Deputy Mayor for Education. And 3, it fails to meet any test of data-driven sensibility related to overcrowding. Those, to me, are the three main issues that are driving the opposition to this. That there's no quantitative analysis showing that the stated reason for proposing this change, which is to alleviate overcrowding at Merge, actually will alleviate overcrowding at Merge, and that it breaks down that sense of neighborhood cohesiveness among the people who think of themselves as a Merge community now, and the walkability factor. Granted, it's not that much farther, but there's a psychological barrier that people have. They think of the Hearst neighborhood as separate from the Merch neighborhood, and that's just the fact. It's just the way it is. And just to state one more time that it's strongly and unambiguously opposed by the constituents. So if you would like to see these written out, I can pass these around. I have a copy for everyone.
Manoli, do you want to?
I'd be interested if there's any other discussion
I have.
about this.
So
it's whether or not to accept this friendly amendment. I'll be upfront. The only thing that gives me pause about the strong opposition, the strong and vocal opposition, is what you referenced before, that there are these reasons and there are other reasons.
Oh.
And we are sort of dodging the issue of the other reasons.
What is this?
When we start to get into
That's the clean copy of the red line.
when we start to get into the strong and unambiguous opposition, we are then stating the basis of that strong and unambiguous opposition. But like you said, there's these other things that are some stated and some unstated, and I don't think we're stating them here. I think we're on stronger ground to state what our views are based on the facts, or at least our view.
Would you propose adding more reasons for strong opposition? And have you heard other?
Yes, I've heard, absolutely. And I'll say the polite ones. The polite ones are, my property value is going to plummet. And I think it's frankly nonsensical.
It's not.
But it is what people are saying. This is part of their strong and vocal opposition on the perception that Murch is a vastly superior school than Hearst, that their property value is going to plummet. Frankly, I think it's nonsensical, but that is part of the strong and vocal opposition. So when we start talking about the strong and vocal and unambiguously opposed constituents, and then these factors that we're stating, we're kind of only telling part
Well, then
of
let's
the
just
story.
say inter alia. I mean, among other things. I mean, I don't want to put in here
They have
that
avenues
people
to
think,
do that.
rightly or wrongly, that Murch is a better school than Hearst. But it is the fact that some people do think that. I don't want to put that in the resolution, but
Go ahead and put in that some parents at Hearst think it's better than Mercer.
Yeah.
That is not the role of an ANC.
Exactly.
By the community,
what I'm trying to reflect is that the people who live
think
in
we
this
need to.
rectangle that is affected feel strongly opposed for whatever their reasons might be.
I have an idea.
But if this rectangle was in yours, it would be the same
Yeah.
thing.
Think
So
about
I
it-
don't, I don't know. It's getting. I don't know. It's not getting.
I-
Like if instead this rectangle was your side of Connecticut and Nebraska. and
Oh, then
all-
I'd be. No.
and-
It's the
and-
same thing.
but
You-
it wouldn't be any different.
well,
Let's just say your side went to Hearst instead of.
or Lafayette.
Let's
No, let's not say
think about it
Hearst.
this way.
So, I
let's
mean,
take
like,
let's take
whatever.
Murch and Hearst out of it. Let's say the city proposed to take this rectangle and raise all the houses and turn it into parkland, something that would benefit the rest
know
of the
a lot-
city.
yeah. A
That'd
lot
be
of
really
residents
good
would
'cause
love
my
it.
neighbor's house.
No,
I'm saying.
it's something that would benefit
That's
the
what they
rest of
want
the
for
city,
Parkland
but
is.
would be devastating to the people who live in that rectangle. It would be totally appropriate for the ANC to say the people who live in that affected area are strongly opposed to it, and on the basis of the fact that we represent them, we are strongly opposed to it too.
Can I, if I may, for a second? There's a couple of things I like in what you did and what Manoli is saying. I think it can be toned down and just said, whereas ANC 3F has heard from residents in the affected area and the majority are opposed. I think we can, I don't think
Just
we.
leave it at that.
Yeah, just, tone it down. And then, but my comment, I have a couple of other things in addition to what you did. I would just like to see, first of all, on, where you talk about Reno Road and walkability, I changed that to say, as well as required to cross a minor arterial, which could cross Reno Road, a minor arterial with no lights or crosswalks, because there are no traffic lights or crosswalks.
There are. They're
Where?
They're
Mass,
crosswalks.
Albemarle,
Albemarle, Van Ness,
Oh,
and
okay.
Davenport.
Yeah, okay, I forgot.
Nebraska.
They are
But
crosswalks.
but I think
There's
that,
crosswalks.
it's really a
You said
minor
minimal.
arterial. And there really are a lot of crosswalks and things to these schools. There's a big difference to me between crossing 37th Street and crossing Reno Road. I mean, that's a minor arterial, it's a thoroughfare, it's just like Connecticut Avenue is.
No, it's not exactly.
Well, Connecticut
Actually,
Avenue is a major
I would
arterial.
rather cross Reno in rush hour than 37.
How many-
Just because Reno's a parking lot. They're in rush hour.
There are quite a
Well,
few
Reno's a
that
parking
cross
lot, yeah, so it's easy to cross.
to get- They gotta cross Reno to get to Murray.
Well, in your area, but I'm talking further down.
So wait a minute, wait, I
That's
have.
that's the issue.
Wait, but
that-
let me finish.
Well,
Let me
but there are
finish.
people
Let me-
that cross in this area, they have to cross Reno to get to Merch, just as well as there are people in the Merch area that have to
I'm
cross
only
to get to.
addressing what he was talking
I mean-
about, people talking about crossing Reno Road.
I think Reno Road is.
Reno
take
Road and all-
Reno.
Okay,
Reno is
so
the table.
Okay.
What else you got?
Two wrongs.
The second whereas you have when you turn the page over,
Well, and that's not
it should
right.
say whereas ANC 3F is not aware of any data-driven, not of a data-driven justification. It should say any data-driven justification,
Yeah, I corrected that in mine as well.
or a data-driven justification, but, I mean, it's just a typograph, just a,
Well, okay, that's, I think I actually want to have like a strong data-driven, because there is
Well,
a
then put the
data-driven
word strong back
justification.
in.
The data-driven justification is that Merch's capacity is 370, enrollment is 626.
No, I'm just-
And Hearst
you
is.
know,
just
I'm
saying-
just correcting this
Yeah.
because it's,
So it's not any, it's actually a,
Strong.
or strong, or add the word.
Or-
It's just missing something.
okay.
It's just not right. Now, here's where I differed with Malachi. What I did here on your second, be it further resolved, I just put, be it further resolved that ANC 3F calls on the Deputy Mayor for Education, that ANC 3F calls on the, I want to just plain oppose the boundary shift in simple language. Whereas ANC 3F opposes the boundary shift or whatever. And forget about providing extensive and grandfathering and all of that. I think all we're saying is we oppose it.
What you don't say.
Well,
Very simply.
I agree with that, actually. I think it muddies the water to talk about, to say we oppose it, but if it's going to happen, here are
Yeah.
the things that we would require.
Yeah.
I would rather be cleaner about it.
I just like to be it further resolved that ANC, opposes the boundary shift, whatever. Very very clean, very simple.
Okay, so 2 sets of edits here. Manoli, any seem good to you?
I would be fine with what Karen is suggesting.
Okay.
Because people are opposed without going into the specifics of the justifications.
Okay.
That's fine. And then,
Well,
Therefore,
I'm raising that as a
how would,
question.
therefore, be it resolved that ANC 3F, I had in there strongly opposes. Are we saying that we're not willing to say strongly?
I mean, no, I was talking more along the lines of this whereas clause. I don't.
Oh, I was in the be it further
Okay,
resolved.
I would-
she's down here.
I would like to put that to a vote then, if we're,
Wait a minute.
I feel strongly
but
about the whereas
so, no,
clause.
This is fine. I think the therefore be resolved. It's the constituents directly affected are strongly and unambiguously opposed. And that it violates the core factors and fails to meet a tested. So this is us. This is us saying something. What I am was more concerned about was the whereas clause,
Well, my whereas was a very simple one, whereas.
and that's where I was talking about
Right.
with
no, but
whereas.
the whereas clause that I
It's a
would
bit of
like
a
to have
dodge,
is
but-
one that reflects what I've been hearing from the people in 3F06. And if we need to make that more broad and say stemming in part from the fact that they live in an area, blah, 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 that's fine, to acknowledge that these are just some of the reasons that they've stated. I'm fine with that.
I would end. I think what Karen is talking about is just ending the sentence that changes.
Where are we now?
In the whereas,
This
the
one.
new
You just said
whereas.
so
Whereas
whereas
families
families
living
living in
in
affected
expressed
area
strong
have expressed
strong-
strong
U.S. opposition to proposed boundary changes.
This
Period.
one right here.
Okay.
This one.
Move on.
If we can accept that, then that's
Okay.
fine.
Here.
Are
That-
you
that's
okay with that,
fine.
Manoli?
Yeah, I
Are
agree.
you
I
okay
agree.
with that, or do you want to?
That's fine.
Leave it,
Okay.
and then get rid of all this other.
Exactly.
Yeah, get rid of
Okay,
all.
so at this point, are any
Are we
more
okay with
comments?
this one?
Wait a
Therefore
minute.
be it resolved? Because I
I-
like your be it resolved. We're saving this one?
Yeah.
This
Okay.
is
1,
is
2,
fine
3.
because
This one, we're saving this, correct?
Wait a minute, you guys are losing me.
No, look at
We're
this.
saying yes to this.
But
And
I would
change
actually
his.
not. I would want to maintain this. Whereas improving schools is a long process and maintaining access in the interim to high-quality schools and feeder patterns for families and neighborhoods with struggling schools is an important goal. I would actually maintain.
And that's fine. The only reason I cut that out is because that's less relevant to the boundary shift. That's more relevant to the student assignments
Yeah,
resolution.
The issue here, though, is and this is a question of Hearst. This is a question of maintaining access, the out-of-boundary access at Hearst. Which, if there's no change in the boundaries, then maybe it becomes less relevant. But, and frankly, I'm a little bit, maybe not confused is the right word, unsure right now on where. I've heard two different things from. I feel like I've heard two different things from the Hearst community. Although I'm mostly talking to you.
So you'll hear two different things from me as well.
But about how the issue of displacing out of boundary. I mean, you've talked about displacing out of
Right.
boundary, but
I have a question
So the
on that.
current, these are rough numbers from Drew and Shay's office, but I believe the current boundary is there are 103 kids eligible to go to Hearst in boundary, and 47 go, 47%, roughly 47 kids. Malachi's families and the number of kids there, but I'm guessing if that were another 100 kids, I don't know.
That's a lot of kids.
I mean,
There
we've
are
got
50 merged families.
483 families here, so, I mean.
No,
so how-
483 houses.
Single-family homes, so how many kids are in that home? I mean,
So-
hers can't take
And 7
400.
buildings, right?
Are you saying you have 100 kids?
400.
I have 100, yes, I'm prolific.
That's way too many.
No,
Well,
there are
if you're not
50, there are
including
50
the- That's
current
almost like
merged
apartment
families in
complexes.
my part of
50 current merged families
I
is a lot
can't go
different
from
than
this one.
453. But to answer
Right.
Melly's question, I think that, again, the principles at Hearst are we welcome families from any community, whether they're from Merch or from Ward 8. I think if you added 50 families, you're not, and you're grandfathering the current out-of-boundary families at Hearst, you're not, in my opinion, speaking from an in-boundary perspective, you're not significantly displacing the opportunities for out-of-boundary families at Hearst.
So you have that much space.
We have
How much
It's the
space,
exact-
once you get built out
Well, then
to,
everybody's going to want to
It's
go.
300, it's currently 300, it's 325 by the addition of some offices and classrooms at
You know-
K-3, so there's not any significant addition of space at Hearst. What I'm saying is.
Then
we
you'll be
currently have
overcrowded.
40 We currently have 47 kids at Hearst from in-boundaries. So that's 230 to 250 kids that are out of boundaries that can either come from Merch or can come from all the other wards. I'm saying if you're adding roughly 50 families and 100 kids, that's 150 kids now in boundaries, and 150 from out of boundaries. I don't think that significantly shifts the opportunity of out-of-boundary families.
That's right. The difference is the current out-of-boundary students at Hearst
All right, that's
are,
fact-based.
no, the current out-of-boundary students at Hearst are there by choice. What's being proposed here is to turn what
They're
would be
being forced.
out-of-boundary
It's a force.
into
It's forcing it.
in-boundary. It's the forced aspect of
right,
it.
it's forced, but then my question is,
Something has to.
then the school, you're going to have more space at Hearst. You're going to get to the same problem Merch has right now.
Well, but then if you, the
Problem
grandfathering
is that
offsets.
inbound families at Merch. That's not the problem at Hearst, even with the expansion of.
Can I make a suggestion here? Because I think we need to start wrapping this up. This
Yeah.
is getting
Oh,
late, and we
goodness.
still have a long agenda. What I would like to see, and it's very clean, and I'm not working from Malachi's, I'm working from your original.
Oh, okay.
I would like to, because that's what I'm more familiar with. I would like to see, after the whereas ANC 3F is not aware, after you're, right before you're therefore be it resolved, your first one, I would like to see just a simple paragraph saying whereas families or whatever living in the area are opposed to the boundary shift. As a whereas clause, not, maybe not that.
We're good with that.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
that's
then
fine.
I would like to see it say, therefore be it resolved for the reason say ANC opposes the proposed changes. Because for whatever, just what you wrote here. Then I would take out, be it further resolved, request the advisory committee to provide more data-driven. I take out the next, be it further resolved, calling on the deputy mayor, and then I would just sum it up with your last two. Which makes it clean and simple.
Um,
I'm not working, I'm working from yours.
yeah, I know.
So you took out,
That's why I think we've already agreed to remove the third to last, the fourth to last.
'Cause that's the grandfathering stuff. I don't want to get
No,
into
not
that.
the, no, that's not the good part of this,
See, I'm working from yours, not Malachi's.
so you took this one out, do you further resolve the ANC request advisory?
I took out the,
we want we want to hear the arguments as to why they're making some of the decisions with a little bit more substantive.
well, then end it on,
So I'm fine with the grandfather, removing the grandfather.
Malachi has that too.
yeah, I want to take out that grandfathering
We've
stuff.
already done that.
We've done that.
Okay.
All right. So at this
Call for the
point,
question.
we're gonna vote.
Well, what do I don't know what I'm voting on.
Yeah, so can you mark
Voting
up,
on so I'm now looking at,
are you looking at yours or
I'm
Malachi's?
looking at some combination of mine and Malachi's. I'm looking at Malachi's. But it's a little bit hard to do that. 'cause it looks like a couple
Is it
of things have
possible
been
that we can
deleted.
vote on the
This-
basis of it, whatever?
Can we
And get it,
vote on?
and then
And
you
then
can
you
put it
send it
together,
around?
and then send it around?
We'll vote on the fact that the commission opposes the boundary change.
Yes.
With, and
And
then
a
we'll
whereas that
recirculate.
basically
And it
says that the
poses
neighbor, the
Putting
neighbors
the
are,
grandfather. That's
and we're
the
getting
big
rid of the
thing.
grandfathering, and we're getting
Yeah.
rid of,
We can recirculate it.
and we can recirculate just with a paragraph saying that residents in the area, you know, the strongly expressed opinions opposing it or whatever. Clean and simple.
You
And just
okay with that?
opposing it.
Okay, let's vote for that. All in favor, say aye.
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 7-0-0. All right. Next up, I'm making a motion to send a letter to DDOT to support a permit at Hearst Recreation Center on May 10th for a birthday party. Someone's getting a ball
Moon bounce.
moon bounce, and it needs a permit
needs
and
insurance.
they have insurance. So,
And that's why it needs the
so
permit.
that's my motion. No discussion. Vote.
I'll
All in
second it.
favor? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thanks. All right. Next.
Aye, sorry.
We don't even
Oh, we were
need
gonna
your
have an
vote.
abstention.
March 2014 meeting minutes. Did everyone see what the last minute
Can we
came
do them
out?
next month? I didn't know.
I handed them out.
No, we can't because we have.
Oh, okay, the quarterly report.
Okay, they were handed
So
out.
here, we'll postpone
I
it.
know.
Read it while we do the other things. Bob, financial report and update.
You want it?
No, yeah.
Because we have not had signing authority, because we have not had a secretary until this meeting, we did not spend any money this quarter other than a $25 check that has not yet been cashed for the ANC Security Fund. Our total available balance is $144,034.05. I sent around the second quarterly report by email to everyone. There's basically nothing in it, so I move that we pass it.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor of this report? Aye.
Aye.
7-0-0.
We'll do the minutes now.
Okay.
Sign where? You keep saying sign there.
There.
Minutes.
And what you do with all the other papers?
So,
I got it,
make
but I
a
don't know where to
motion
sign
to
it, so
approve the
you gotta
March
show me.
2014 minutes.
Second it.
All in favor? Any comments?
Wait, what?
Minutes.
Minutes
Comments?
that are sent out.
Aye.
I revised. Read
All
the
right.
comments.
All in favor?
Bob, you
Aye.
got Sally's comments?
Yes, he's
Okay.
got, they've been sent to him.
Alki,
On the-
minutes.
I abstained. I wasn't at the
He
meeting.
You
went
can
in.
still vote on
I'll
You
abstain.
don't have to,
Signature
he
was
doesn't
sent.
have to.
Mary Beth, are you good with minutes?
Yes.
Okay. So 6-0-1. Okay.
I did watch the live stream.
Perfect. Discussion of hire administrative help. So, Mary Beth and others have reached out to me.
Yes.
Members of the community have reached out about hiring an administrative person. I had an informal discussion with Bob, and we could figure out the tax things if need be. If we go forward on this, what are we thinking? How many hours and all?
Well, it depends if
15 to
these
20
meetings keep
hours.
going this late.
15 to 20 hours.
Yeah.
Let's say
I think,
20 hours.
You know,
Who knows?
it would be great to have somebody help set up the meeting, somebody to
And
take
get
the
in the bottom
minutes
floor.
of the meeting, somebody who
This
will
one?
Yeah.
track the resolution
Can
and
we
also
do it as a
have
consultant?
strong web skills to make sure that the resolutions that we pass are posted on the website and circulated to the appropriate people.
Here's a,
I mean, there's, you know, a number of spreadsheets that I would like to have done. There's a lot of, again, that's vision committee stuff that we could use help with.
You did your license
Um,
number?
It's just, I think it's a really important
Oh, I
thing, and
understand.
as I understand it, most
Tax ID.
ANCs
One for
had help,
six.
and this one had help in the past.
that's,
Here's an
Yeah.
office manager one from
That's-
Chevy Chase.
And
So-
Chevy Chase just ran
yes,
an ad.
that's
Yeah,
what
that's the
I,
one. Sally just handed
Yeah.
it to me.
So I think, well, I guess what I would propose is we hire someone for 25 hours a month, which should be more than adequate. That would cover meetings and then
25 a
miscellaneous
month?
stuff
Yeah.
and $20 an hour and see what
that's
happens.
4 weeks.
Yeah, but
Divided
most
by
of,
4.
but you know, she's going to be at a meeting for maybe 3 hours.
She'll
We're
be-
not
she'll
usually
be
at
And
like-
this
seven.
So say a meeting's
7 and a
6
half
hours of that.
He-
and it's
she or he, 7.5
19 hours of miscellaneous
Yeah, you
stuff.
got a lot of miscellaneous. Not every commissioner is going to be using them. I don't need the help.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Adam doesn't usually need help.
Well, I would think Adam
I
would
would
need
use-
help as
No,
a
that's
chair.
the meetings and stuff.
As secretary, I will use.
Yeah,
yeah, but
some
and
of the
I, would,
admin
I
But
think,
not for
wait,
that,
I
Bob.
think other people need to use this person to help with getting drawings out to us that shouldn't be just seen online, that aren't, good drawings, or background documentation
Let me ask a question,
for
Bob.
us to send out.
When you go to, when, like Malachi just got the Red First one, does the ANC get another copy of the public space application?
We should, yeah.
we had 2, I think.
You'll get
I,
2
I
of
think
them.
I got one and you got one.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it
That-
should have gone
I
to
think
the,
what I'm asking is,
the
can one of
mailbox.
those copies, one of those sets be put in the ANC office so that we can all go down and look at them?
Sure. Just
Because,
But
the-
it-
mailbox.
because these scanned ones are too
No,
small
what,
to
what we
see.
got, the
little.
hard copy we got was the reduced one.
Oh,
We only got the expanded one after you.
Wait a minute.
suggested
I
ask
have
for
a
it.
solution to that. And
We
because
always
I
have
asked,
to ask the
I
applicant.
called Gottlieb on this, and he says we have every right to go, even though we're giving it public space in the small form, small drawings, because I got the same thing at Park Van Ness. We have every right to go to the owner, the applicant, and
That's
request
exactly what I did.
full-size drawings so we can read
Of course we
them.
do.
But
That's
public-
exactly what I did when you
But wait a
suggested
second,
that. And
wait a
that's what I
minute.
sent
Public
around.
space-
Right, but even they're on a screen. You cannot mark things. I have to get my husband to print these out because he's an architect and he's got a CAD machine that he can print out, and he can print them 24 by 36 or 18 by. I mean, I'm sorry, but these are not readable. The things we are getting.
but wait a second, public
They're just
space.
not readable.
public-
Okay, so
public-
whoa. Okay.
Wait a minute, public
No,
space
no,
used
no,
to send
no,
us
no.
the big drawings.
Does it? So
No, they
Look.
don't.
They used to.
They
So-
don't now because of the tops. They've told me that.
look. Let's talk about this administrative person. I think we can all ask people that apply for stuff, and if you want to make it our policy, where if they don't provide us junk, we oppose their stuff just on principle or
I
something.
think it would be
I don't
great
have
to
a
start
problem with
doing that.
But in my experience, when you ask for this, they provide it. I've never had anyone who's like, "No, I'm not giving it to you."
No, I
What,
agree.
the owner?
Yeah.
No, the owners will, but I think we as commission, I'm asking all of us, when we have something, to please ask for drawings, readable drawings, and 7 sets.
Okay, that's fine.
7
That's fine.
sets that can be handed out to the commissioners, so we can review them and make notes of them.
In which an admin can help
Right.
run the
I have
copy.
a
That's
question.
all I was saying, is
Well,
that
an
admin
actual
should
No, but
question
they're
about the
supposed to give us
admin
the
person.
copies.
I have a question about the
vanilla.
admin person, Bob. If at the amount of time that they were talking about and a reasonable rate, what percentage of our allotment would this end up being?
How much is our allotment each? have?
Quarterly, it's 3,682.
So it'd be a significant portion of it. So you're talking 25 hours at $20 is $600 a month times 4 is 2,400, and if our quarterly allotment's what, 30?
$3,896.32.
So we'd have
No, but wait a minute.
$1,000.
Wait a second. No, you don't, because in addition, you have unemployment you have to pay, Social Security, and Bob's nodding. You have to pay all health insurance.
You don't have to
You
pay
have-
any insurance.
Gross it
Yes,
up
we
by
do.
20%. something like that.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, well, these
remember.
guys are doing the same thing, and they get
I
roughly the
don't
same
know,
allowance.
but you know what? I don't know how they're doing it. But I guess my question is, we once hired somebody, we hired them as a consultant, and we wrote the job description with certain responsibilities so we could get away with it. So we didn't have the unemployment taxes and the Social Security, the IRA, and all of the other stuff, or for whatever the district's pension fund is. We didn't have all that stuff. Gottlieb doesn't like it, but it can be done.
That's what, because
So
Gottlieb
you
used
had
to
the
be one
auditor.
of those people.
Is that what it was, that he used
Did
to
we
be a
talk to the
consultant?
auditor
Yeah.
about
No, he used to be
I'm
an
talking about
admin.
hiring.
He
She
was like
strongly recommends.
Yeah, he was, I thought it wasn't he? Where was it?
I mean, it's not
Yeah.
just the hours, it's all of the other stuff that puts you in the
Here,
hole.
why don't you sign all this while we discuss this?
But I'm not saying no, Mary Beth, but we saved that up for because we didn't have help, and when the district got in trouble, we had to let go of our help,
Is that it, too?
because we didn't get a lot.
Okay,
I'm just saying, if there's a way
I can't do
around
it
it.
anymore, Karen. I cannot keep up.
But
with
wait
it.
a second, I'm not saying that, but there are ways to do it as a consultant, where you didn't have all these other taxes on top of the salary.
I move
So
the-
is
I
there,
call for the
is
question.
there a resolution or a motion on the table that we are going to explore this?
I think we should explore it and have a
We-
job description. So that
Definitely, we
person-
need to have a job
We
description.
definitely need a job
Yeah.
description.
Sound for it.
Well, what does the Chevy Chase description say?
It doesn't.
Says Chevy Chase Advisory Commission seeks part-time office manager with administrative and computer skills to staff its office, maintain website, attend meetings, 15 to 20 hours per week, must know Word and Excel, knowledge of DC government and Chevy Chase area useful, salary $20 an hour.
And I think you also ought to know that.
I think that
Wait a
sounds
minute.
great, and I would
Chevy
suggest
Chase,
you
wait a
send
minute though. Chevy Chase does not do grants like we do. They have a limit of $2,000 and you don't get it twice.
So what?
We don't get any grant application.
We
got
get
fine
very
with that.
few
I'm not worried about it.
applications.
No, I'm just
I
saying-
call for the
I
question.
just,
I just had a question of what the percentage was. I was curious. I'm supportive.
So it'd be
Let's move on.
almost all.
So is there a motion on the table?
I
yes.
think we need a job description, and what Mallory just said. We need to know anybody applying for a job is going to want to see a job description.
So my
Motion is to
motion is 25 hours at $20. We will look at whether we can structure it as a consultant to save on taxes, and we'll discuss with the auditor and whoever we get opinions, but whichever way it ends up being, we can do it. And the job will be to set up, attend meetings, take minutes, prepare minutes, and do other administrative functions as determined by the commissioners.
second.
Thanks.
Call for the question.
Did you write that down?
But that, no, I would like to see the job description before we send something out, though.
Sure, that's no problem.
Well,
Before
we
you
can
send
do
it out,
that, but we need
can
to
still-
get it,
Near ready to send anything out.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
don't worry
No,
about
but I don't want to just approve based on what Adam just summarily described.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
with the
All right.
understanding that, that we're going to look at this more.
Of course we are.
Okay.
I mean, we'll develop a job description.
Well, you're the
Hire a
secretary,
person,
you
but
need to
it'll be generally
develop the
in-
job description.
It's your job.
There we go.
Sorry.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I'm abstaining.
Abstaining?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I don't think we're ready to vote on it.
Okay, 601.
601.
Last but
Someone's
not
giving us
least,
their ad.
you wanted something? What do you want? Is this-
I don't know. I haven't read it yet.
I would like.
It's on the tails of the,
Can I read it?
sorry. Sure, read it out loud.
I would like to request an addition to the agenda under miscellaneous item. Proposed, all right, all commissioners to send the appropriate supporting documentation referred to in proposed resolution and background material relevant to proposed resolution in a timely manner so it can review by 7 days for ANC meetings. So public space will come in 7 sets.
Which we just talked about.
So you're making a resolution to?
No,
So,
it's not a
what is it?
resolution, I'm
This
just
is-
asking this as our policy.
I got a
This
motion
become
to
our
I mean, I think
policy.
this is-
Not a
I got a motion to
resolution.
adjourn.
No, you're not.
I have a motion to adjourn. This is executive session stuff that we can do via email, like, or whatever.
don't
And
have
we can do it by
we
email.
don't
And
have
we
an
can talk
off-site
about it. We
meeting.
can hear. I'm
I
not going to
think-
spend
I
an
think
hour
Manoli-
debating this.
I think this is really important, guys. I really
If there's not a
would like-
resolution,
I'm
then,
not asking for a resolution.
then let's move on.
Then is it a
Well,
is
none
it a
of the stuff we
bylaw?
just did
No,
is a
You can
resolution.
do amendment to the bylaws. Propose it as amendment to the bylaws.
No, we don't want. But
No.
Look, I
it's-
think-
It's
Look,
administrative.
she raises valid points that we should all try to circulate stuff as early as
I agree.
possible. I agree completely. When we can, I try to. I don't know what else to say. I don't know. Sometimes
the-
it's not possible.
Well,
I
I
agree with
definitely
everything
did
you
not
said.
see
Well,
the Intelsat. If you said, I'd like to
This
know
is
where
the
it
last
was.
minute.
I mean,
I
and
mean,
also,
it wasn't
I
even on
didn't
the
either, Adam.
agenda.
What's that?
This wasn't even on the agenda. I mean, this really
It was
last
added
minute.
to the
no, I added
It
it.
was
It's
added.
added to the agenda.
We added to the
But
agenda.
we're
yeah,
not
yeah,
seeing
fair
it until 11:20 at night.
I mean, let's
Frankly.
think about how to formalize
Well, I
this.
think
I
that-
guess.
Well, I did it as part of the administrative assistant, and also to help us, but also that we get proper supporting documentation in time to understand the resolutions. That's important. We are not getting that. I'm sorry, I'm not getting that. I can't review 7 sets of drawings or whatever from Friday till Tuesday and be able to comment back to people. I mean, it's just not, it's not fair to any of us. It really isn't. I mean, I'm not saying this, I'm saying it for myself, for all of us. This is for all of us to have some guidelines. I mean, we had some really big things on the agenda tonight, and from Intelsat to the 37th Street to the school boundaries, you know, these are all big issues. And we did not receive, no matter who it was or when it was done, I mean, I'm picking on Intelsat because that's a big document to read through and understand, you know, and to get a letter of proposal and not understand what
I do think
what,
it was,
what the people are saying or what we should be due diligence on. We should be doing due diligence on that. And I think some of the audience and our constituents said that very clearly to us tonight, extremely clearly.
you know, I think,
Okay. I mean, I agree. I think where it's possible, we should give each other as much time as possible. But
but you know, I
at the
also,
same time, nothing forces Bob or Mary Beth or Malachy or anyone to do anything, really. I mean, I think we could all agree that giving everyone
application 2 weeks ago.
as much notice as possible seems perfectly fair. I mean, I think I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, there's I don't know.
Can
You know what
we
would be
just
helpful?
get the drawings? I mean,
but wait a second, Sally, let me
And-
just interject for a second, because part of the problem with public space, and especially with applicants, when you have the top system that they work under now,
I know of.
and all the other commissioners, you really need to get trained in tops.
Yes, you do.
So that you can.
Three of you that haven't
Wait a
been
minute, so
trained.
that you can look at it. But in a lot of cases, from the initial drawings, after the Office of Planning comments and Urban Forestry and all the different agencies, the plans change. And sometimes they,
Right.
you get a new, so making it,